In. We are just doing another homework review session. We've still got a bunch of homework from weeks 3 and 4 to look through. So let's go through it. Right, first things first, let's get VS Code open because we're going to need that. Seems to be verifying it. I think that means I've probably had a small update. So let's see what that is. Okay. Right. Well, whilst that loads up, let's get some homework. Okay. Right, let's just load up this one. Okay. Let everybody know as well. Okay. Right, so hey to everybody who's just joined as well. Feel free to say hello in the chat, just so I've got an idea of who's in. And let's take a look at some of the week 3 homeworks that we've got. I just want to see if we've got any that are okay. Yeah, so we've got one here from Rachel. So let's clone this repository and then we'll take a look at it. So for anybody who can remember, we press git clone and then we paste in that URL. And in the meantime, what we'll do is just bring this over to the left-hand side, put this on the right. We don't need that, and we don't need that. Hey, Rachel. Good to have you with us. So I'm looking at Rachel's homework, but as you know, it's we've got 2 Rachels, and this one isn't yours. But hopefully there's still some use that you can find from it. So let's open this up. Now I need to make the size a bit bigger because I can see here that that's pretty small. All right, we'll do it one more time. Okay, hopefully that's becoming a bit easier to see. Now let's open this. And we've also got Rachel Oldham not with us. Good timing. We're just having a look at yours. Okay. Right. So, firstly, this looks really cool. I like this. Nice, clean design. Looks like everything's... I'm guessing this is pretty much how you wanted it to as well. An interesting choice of kind of ipsum lorem text you've got as well. I haven't seen this one before. Well, based on like the kind of words that are showing up anyway, maybe you can let us know what type of ipsum lorem text you're using. For anybody who hasn't heard of ipsum lorem before, that's it's got roots in Latin, but essentially it's just placeholder text, and there's lots of different generators available online. But let's take a look at this. So, I mean, in terms of layout, this looks pretty cool. Of course, we've got something here whereby probably we would have some sort of responsive design to fix this. But of course, that's something that we looked at in week 4. So this is week 3 homework. So it's fair enough if that's not been kind of incorporated yet. Okay, so this one's hipster lorem. I love that. That's amazing. I did think there were some pretty kind of like hipster words in here, like Edison bulb. And and things like that. So that's pretty cool. I like this. But let's just take a look at the let's take a look at the CSS as well and see what we've got going on here. Okay. Okay, cool. Yep. So we're using things like display and flex and stuff like that. Actually, to be fair, come to think of it, no, week 3 was the homework where you would have been introduced to media queries and things like that, and learning how to do responsive design. So there is something we could do here as we hit. I mean, as we can see, kind of when we're at this point, there's too much. There's not enough text per line. Really, what we ideally want is something that's around about here. So as it gets any smaller than this, so we're on about 900 pixels now. This is probably, as it gets smaller, this is where we would want to stack the picture and the text. So we probably have some sort of media query here. So let's have a look. So we're looking at a section class called top block. So what we could do is, if we have a look at the CSS for top block, I just want to make sure we've not got a media query that I'm missing somewhere. So it doesn't look like we have. If I search for top block, I can only see one. So what we could do here below it is at media, and then we could do something such as max width. Let's just say 900 pixels for now. And maybe what we could do in here is top block, and then we could do flex flow column. Now let's see what that does to our code. So it's live reloaded, and as I don't know if you can see the pixel count in the top right corner. It's slowly going down, and we're about to hit 900. So there we go, and then it turns to that. Maybe what we could do actually is have the image on top of the text, in which case we could do column reverse, and that's going to reverse the order of the two. So we could do something like that. And then, of course, we'd probably want to do something such as center align this text, and maybe put a bit of space between the image and the text as well. But yeah, you could do something like that. So my advice would be to start having a look at media queries for that if you haven't already. I can't remember, Rachel, if you were the person who has been to a boot camp before, or kind of already potentially is working in code. Let me know if you are or not. But either way, I think a media query like that would help a lot. But yeah, in terms of the rest of the design, I really like this. And again, I think you could maybe do some sort of media query for this section at the bottom where we've got why do we meditate. But yeah, really good. I really like that. And in terms of the CSS you've got in here as well, it's pretty good. I like that. As we kind of said before as well, I personally look at this as less is more when it comes to the amount of properties you put into a class. And it doesn't look like you're going crazy in terms of like putting loads and loads of things in there just to try and figure out what works. It looks like you've got a few things that just do the job exactly as you want. So that's really good. But yeah, cool. Okay, awesome. I really like that. So we will mark that as complete. Let's see if we've got any more week 3 homeworks to take a look at. Okay, so we've got one here from Maria. So let's clone this one. And whilst it's copying that, I'll just take a sip of tea. Okay, cool. I do apologize if you can hear the sound of me sipping as well. If you can, that's a little bit gross. I'm sorry for that, if you can hear it. Hopefully you can't. Okay, right. So we've got Maria's. Let me just close down that. Okay, interesting. So we've got quite a lot going on here as well. And this makes me think you've incorporated some grids and things like that. I could be wrong, but there's definitely something going on because this looks like a pretty complex website. I don't mean that in terms of just there being a lot of color, but already we can see a lot of sections here. We've got our navigation at the top, and we've got some interesting hover effects as well, so that's cool. But then we've got this section here at the top where it says meal plans made for you, and then we've got lots of different sections here. So that's cool. Just laughing at Rachel, you're making me laugh today. Yeah, I was talking about this ASMR phenomenon with a friend of mine a few days ago, and actually, I won't get into that topic. That's probably for the best that I don't. So Kieran asks, what are we building? So at the moment, this is some homework review. So the academic students have just been learning how to use HTML and CSS. And we incorporated some media queries and some methodologies and layout techniques such as Flex and Grid and things like that. So this is homework off the back of that. Right, okay. Let's see. So firstly, I mean, I like you've got some pretty clear class names. So that's cool. They're not kind of, it's not difficult to understand what section is which. Okay, so let's take a look at this content here. Okay, so we've got a main section. Okay, I really like the semantic tags you've got as well here. So you've got an aside and things like that. Interesting. Okay, yeah, then it looks like you're using Grid. So look at that. That's really cool. So when we hover over the container, it shows you all the grid lines. You've got good spacing in between each one as well. You've made use of gaps as well in between, so that's kind of like margins in between each grid section. So this is really good use of Grid here. I really like this. Just taking another sip. Hopefully there's no ASMR, or is it pronounced asthma? I'm not sure. Hey Afis, good to have you with us. Anybody else who's joined as well, feel free to say hello in the chat, just so I've got an idea of who's here. It's always nice to know who we're chatting with. But let's see what happens as we reduce this page. Let's see if we've got anything in place. Okay, right. So we can see that we haven't. And interestingly, even though I'm reducing the size, the page isn't reducing with it. So we can see here at the bottom, all of a sudden, we've got this horizontal scroll as well. And as we've said before, we're not fans of doing that. So that is something we need to take a look at. And the reason why that'll be happening is because something's not scaling down. So the container, that's cool. We've got 100% width on it. So that should scale down. But something is not running with a percentage. What could it be? Maybe there's something further down. All right, let's have a look. So as we get to here, something's still overflowing. It's not the footer. It's not the professional section, although maybe it is a little bit. Well, either way, there's something that I would recommend taking a look at. But let's try and figure out what we can do to make our content flow a bit better. So, okay. We've got, in fact, let's just put a width of 100% on this nav. See if that fixes anything. Okay, so it's not that. One thing I would bear in mind as well, actually, in general, is Grid's really cool to use, but I'd be a bit mindful of using Grid for the entire website. So as we can see here, we've got our container that is for the whole website. And then inside of it, you've got all of these different grid elements like a navigation and a banner and things like that. Now, chances are this banner doesn't really need to be inside a grid. And the same applies to this navigation at the top, because they're just 100% width. They're kind of just the same as like block level elements. So I wouldn't have them inside the grid. What I would do is I would use the grid for this section here below this banner So we've got content, main class content. Maybe I would wrap this entire kind of everything you've got here that's with this kind of like yellowish background. That is probably the container, I would say, for the grid. And the rest of it doesn't need to be inside it. But it's still really, you've still used it really well. But yeah, do you know what? It'll be quite difficult to try and implement some media queries with this because of the fact that the whole page is inside a grid. So it would require a lot of work to kind of reposition things. So we'll move on from there. But in terms of just the rest of the CSS you've written, I think this is like you've done a really good job with this, and it shows that you've either previously got experience with building websites, or you've just a really quick learner. Either way, you can be happy with what you've done, Maria. So that's cool. Let's have a look. I'm really sorry, I can't pronounce your name without kind of knowing that I'd probably mess it up. So I won't say it, but you've said, can you please take a look at the homework I did? I certainly can if you have marked it. Sorry, if you've handed it in, I should say. But I can't see your name on here. I don't see your name as a piece of homework that you've done. Okay, right, that makes sense. You are a Ruthran. See, that's the problem when some of you go by lots of different names. It's impossible to know who you are. So, okay, cool, awesome. In that case, yeah, I can definitely take a look at yours. Here we go. Okay, right. So let's clone this. Okay. And let's take that. Okay. Right. Something tells me you've got potentially some images that haven't appeared. So we've cloned everything. So first things first, let's take a look at these images. Can we have the pronunciation option in the Stackademic website? Do you know what? That could be a good idea, Hafiz. I like that. Because you did mention that the other day, and I noticed that how you said LinkedIn do that. Maybe we can be someone who does something like that as well. So yeah, that's a nice idea. That's certainly something we can think about. So right now, for anybody who watched the last homework review session, can any of you remember what the problem might be as to why an image might not load up? Because I can see potentially what the issue is. And maybe some of you are typing an answer, but that's fine either way. I'll diagnose this problem straight away. So by the looks of it, we've got a header tag that has a background image, but it's not picking up the image. So we can see here, this is where the image is. Now, the problem is the CSS file, if you can see the file structure on the left-hand side, is next to the index, but the images aren't next to the index either. They're inside this docs folder. So we need to make this URL something such as docs/. You're correct, Arutha, and there was something wrong with your background image. Inside your CSS, you hadn't linked up the image correctly because your images are inside this docs folder, but your references weren't to that. So let's see what happens now if anything changes. Oh, actually, wait, I just remembered you've got a media query with one as well. So I just want to do one thing. Actually, okay, I can see what you've done here. So you've got two separate images for the media queries. Okay, so let me just see what happens when we make this smaller. Is anything changing with that image? So it doesn't look like it is. So one thing to bear in mind is that you don't need to have exactly the same stuff in the media query as in the original. So let's take a look at what you've got here. So you can see in this header, you've got text align, background image, background size, and so on. Actually, to be fair, you've got, I mean, some of these things don't need to be there like this, but then the background image, by the looks at, you've got a different one. So let's see what happens as we make this website smaller. Okay, so we've got a different image there. No, that's fair enough if you've got different images loading. I mean, one thing I'd bear in mind is that it's probably not the best practice to make a user download two separate images, because your media query doesn't stop the user from downloading everything. So if you've got a media query, say for a tablet, you've got another media query for desktop and so on, fine. If your user's viewing it on a desktop, then they're going to see the desktop styles, but it's still going to load up that entire CSS file. So I'd be mindful of that. You're effectively making a user download two photos, even though they can only see one. So something to bear in mind. Okay, so right, let's see what we've got here. So okay, so we're using classes. That's good. We're not using IDs apart from for the navigation, so that's cool. I can see you using IDs and classes, which is exactly what we said before. So that's really good. Okay. So it looks like you've got things working as I imagine you want them to. Let's see what this looks like as we get really small again. So if we get to something like 410 pixels, okay, so things look like they're working as you'd expect them to. Let's just take a look at the classes. Okay, so we're using width 100 VW and height 100 VH. Let's see what happens if we take that off. Okay, for width, I probably just recommend just using 100%. Unless there's a specific reason why you want it to be VW, but I'd probably just use 100% because it's a little bit easier to reason with and interpret when you're just kind of looking through lots of code. But yeah, 100 VH, I can see why you've used that. That makes sense. That's cool. So the only thing I would say is just be mindful when you are writing media queries, you don't need to copy and paste everything into it. Just put the things that need to be in there. So what I mean is, let's copy this media query we've got here. Oh, sorry, not that one. In fact, yeah, let's cut that and bring it down here for a second. Okay, so if we take a look at these two media queries, this media query for header and the original, we can see we've got a lot of duplication there that we don't need. So we don't need any of that because we can see we've already got it in the original declaration. Okay, so we need the font size. We don't need those. We don't need that. And we don't need that. So media queries only need to include the things that you're changing. It doesn't need to just copy over everything again. So you'll see that I've taken all of that stuff out, but it's not changed anything. Everything's still the same as you had it before. So yeah, so that's all really. Just bear that in mind. Think of it like this: the bigger your CSS file is, the more that your user has to download. So we want to try and get rid of any duplication where we can. But yeah, no, it's a good start. So I think there are some things that we could work on with the design, But in terms of what you've written, it seems like you've got a good understanding of CSS, and that's only going to get better. So I think you can be happy with that. So well done, Arutharan. We will mark that as complete. Okay, let me just refresh this page so that I can see how many tasks we've got left. Okay, right, let's take a look at SmileAds, because I know that you wanted me to take a look at what you had done. Oops. Git clone at the start. There we go. Okay. Right, let's take a look at this one. Okie dokie. Right, interesting. Okay, so let me just check this as well. Okay, so we've not got any media queries in this one, but I can see that you have been using CSS variables, which is something that we spoke about in week 4. So that's cool that you've taken that information and used it into week 3's homework. Okay. So let's take a look at your CSS. If I'm perfectly honest, I think the design needs some work, but that's of course something that we'll tackle in the future. I might need some understanding of the CSS that you've written, the class names, because they look really confusing to me. So I don't know if you can see what we've got in the developer tools, but for example, we've got a class called navigation and we've got a class called container. So that's fine. It's fine if you're continuing with that process, but then afterwards we've got this MR hyphen intermediate hyphen heading hyphen wrap. And then it looks like we're following a process, but then all of a sudden we've got redirectional tile, which is using camel casing, whereas throughout the rest of it, you're using kebab casing. So I'd be mindful of things like that. Like if this was a website that you wanted to expand on, you need to make sure you've got your CSS under control from the beginning. And this doesn't look like CSS that is under control, based on the naming at least. I can see as well that there's quite a few classes you've got that don't actually have anything on them. So, for example, this wrapper component doesn't have any styling on it, in which case there's no need for it to even be called wrapper component. For example, I should theoretically be able to delete that class name and nothing changes because nothing's been done to it. So I'd be mindful of things like that. You're kind of doing overkill, really. And it looks like the same for a lot of these classes as well. A lot of these aren't doing anything. So again, this can be deleted. This one can also be deleted. Redirectional tile can be deleted. There's a lot that can be deleted here that doesn't need to be on there. Okay, and again, we've got a lot of these kind of redirectional tiles that don't do anything. So I'm a little bit confused for this. Let's see what happens with these vegetables here at the bottom. Okay, so we've got some nice spacing. What happens as we get smaller? Okay, so it looks like the images just kind of fall on top of each other. So, and I can see here that what's happened is it looks like you're using floats. This is a really old practice. So I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but this looks like homework that's been completed without actually watching any of the lessons, or at least the third lesson, which is the one where we would have spoken about this stuff. It looks like maybe you've watched lesson 4 and that's why you've got CSS variables, but you've not watched lesson 3, which had or CSS part 2, I should say. CSS part 3 had the variables, CSS part 2, we spoke about things like flex and grid and how you shouldn't use floats and how you shouldn't use tables. So for me, Smallowad, this looks like I would recommend you go back and watch that video. I mean, it's on YouTube, so do yourself a favor and watch it. Nevertheless, we'll mark it as complete. And from what I can see here, though, looks like week 4's homework as well is just the same. You've handed in the same homework for both of them. So, I mean, look, I'll mark it as complete for now. But as I mentioned, please go back and watch the video because it's worth it for you. Okay, let's take a look at Daniela's. Okay. Oh, okay. So that repository is not found. Let's just check that link. Okay. Right, here we go. Looks like that's the link we need. Okay, was it this one? Right, I've got too many homeworks here now. Here we go, it's that one. Okay, let me just delete these 3. And this one. Okay, so which one did you submit for this? H202. Okay, so it should be this one. Oh, okay. I like this. Right, Daniela, you must definitely be somebody who's coded before, or at least designed before, because this looks really clean and really smart. So, okay. Right, so, I mean, on the face of it, this looks really good. So let's take a look at the CSS we've got here. So first thing, I can see lots of variables in the root, so that's cool. In fact, as well, it looks like you've split the CSS up into separate files, and you're using a normalizer as well. So that's really cool. Okay. Yes, and you're using Inter. That's a really good font. I like that font. Okay, well, if we take a look at this CSS, this looks like smart CSS. You know what you're doing. Using variables as well throughout it, kind of appropriately. That's cool. You've got it looks like you've got a proper style that you're following as well, at least in terms of a methodology. So this looks like you're using block element modifier. So you can see here we've got hero, which is the block, and then we've got elements within the block. So really well put together, those bits. Again, as well, so we've got certain things here where you've got modifiers. So we've got a title, a block, and then we're modifying the title here with a bordered one. So that's really good. So look at this as well. So using some kind of intermediate to advanced CSS grid techniques as well. So that's really cool. For anybody who hasn't seen this before, we didn't touch upon it in the lesson because I thought it was a bit too much information to give. But this is just a nice way of being able to mark out content in your grid and kind of give it names. Okay, do you know what? I don't need to look at any more of that. It's really good. Let's just see what happens as we bring this down a bit. Okay, cool. So you're implementing some things as well. So that's really good. Okay, yeah, I really like this. This is great homework. This is really good. you have definitely been coding from before this, because just because it's clear that you've got experience. So that's really good. And the reason why I want to point that out as well is because I don't want anyone to feel bad if they're kind of comparing their work to, say, Daniela's piece just then. It's clear that Daniela has been coding for a while. I don't know how long, but at least longer than, say, the duration of this course, probably at least from last year. So that's why, she's got more experience with it and things like that. Okay, let's take a look at Irene's homework. Okay. So this one's called Love Path. Interesting. Let's see what Love Path is about. Okay, so first things first, it looks like this is not formatted as you expected it to. Maybe the CSS file hasn't loaded. Let's take a look. Okay, so it looks like we've probably got the issue here. So let's put our full stop and slash, refresh the page. Oh, okay. Let's just double check. Okay, so I can see an image hasn't loaded up because of this space here. So I think we need to put, is it %20? In fact, it's just not going to load because the image isn't, you've not put the image in the repository. So this isn't going to work here. But nevertheless, this CSS looks a little bit funky. So, okay. So first thing I can see is we've got a class called container. I'm guessing this is meant to say container. Let's check. Yeah, so it looks like you've got one that's potentially called container. See what happens if we change that. Okay, so it brings that out a bit, but it looks like there's still quite a bit that looks a bit strange. So interestingly, okay, so the body's got flex on it. Okay, so that's fine if you're making the entire thing flex. And then you put that on there, so that's okay. Okay. So I'd be mindful of this. As you can see here, your the repository's not got an image in it, which means it's never going to load up. So make sure the image is inside the folder. By the looks of it, we've put margin none and padding none. They are not. They're not values. I think what you mean is 0. So it should be margin 0, padding 0. So just be mindful of that. And then again, we've got quite a lot of styles here that look a bit messy. So I don't know if anybody can see what we've got in the dev tools, but we've got this line here where it's not been formatted properly. So if you don't put a semicolon at the end of each property value, it's not going to be able to, it will just stop interpreting it. So it looks like you've tried to use a transform here, but you didn't close off the line before. So let's put that in now. And then even still, this looks like it's not quite right. Okay, so this to me looks like you probably still need some work with CSS because there's quite a lot on here that could do with some work. What also it looks like is you've got, hopefully you're using VS Code, but you need to explore it a bit more and take a look at some extensions. because and ultimately when you're writing code in VS with something like VS Code, it should be picking up mistakes. So, for example, if we look at this body here, if I want to add some additional things like that, it's going to allow me to do it. Then if I've made a mistake where I've, say, for example, not closed off the line before with a semicolon, you can see this margin changes color, and I've got some like fuzzy little lines telling me that there's problems with it. So those things are there to tell you that what you've written is not correct. If they're not showing up for you, then it's probably worth Googling something such as VS Code extensions. Maybe put CSS in that line as well, so that it'll give you some CSS extensions to help you with things like that. So I think this needs some work. So okay, and ultimately as well, I don't. Were there any? Okay, so there was one media query we've got here. Okay, so you have used a media query. So I mean, at the very least, we'll mark it as complete. But it's really important, Irene, that you revisit the lessons from before moving on to JavaScript on Monday. I would really recommend that. Okay, let's take a look at Prakritis. So by the looks of it, I can see you've handed in the same homework for week 3 and 4. That's okay, because we did say that some of you could do that if you were catching up. So let's just mark week 3 as complete, and we'll take a look at this week 4 homework. Okay, so again, we've got, but be careful, some of you, when you're submitting these links, because sometimes you're submitting links that don't work. So, for example, this is the link you've submitted, but this is not the one you want to submit. It should be this one here, so that it can actually be cloned. This is something that I've typically noticed sometimes when students are completing homework in the same repository rather than using different repositories for each one. Ideally, you should try and use different repositories for each homework, because it's at the very least, going to give you some experience with using Git and using it frequently. Okay, so let's take a look at this homework. Interesting. Cool. Okay. So first things, this looks cool. Looks like, I'm guessing you've got some grid work going on here, or Flex at least. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So it's Flex. That's fair. I would have used Flex for something like this as well, because it's not overly complex in terms of the layout structure. But let's see what happens as we make this smaller. Okay, cool. Yep. So you've got media queries doing what you'd want them to. So that's cool. I think you have anyway. Or is it just okay? No, you haven't. It's just wrapping over once it gets to a certain point. So I would probably recommend having a media query at around about this point here. Maybe 1,000 pixels, because otherwise, like for example, now it's not wrapping, but this subscribe for our newsletter box is just too small. So I probably would have done a media query here to change the flex flow from from row wrap to column, and then resize these to be this section here to be 100%. Oops. Oh no, this one. Oh wow. Okay, so here it is. This one here, and so on. Let's take a look at the CSS we've got here. Okay, cool. So yeah, again, we've got some keeping things simple. So each class just only has a few lines of CSS in it, and they do exactly what's needed. So it's not overkill with just lots and lots of things in there that will make it unruly. This is not. I'm not a fan of this though. Here looks like you're using IDs and you're styling them. So as mentioned in the previous lessons, don't do this. Use classes, don't use IDs for this. So take a leaf out of Aruthrun's book. As we saw earlier, he was using IDs and classes on elements, which is fine. But he was using the ID as a link tag, as an anchor tag, and then using the class for styling. That's what you should do here. So it's fine if you've got a primary ID and it's doing something for your navigation or something, but you shouldn't be styling it as well. So just a tip there. But on the whole, this is some decent homework, so that's fine. Okay, we'll take a look at a couple more. We've got one here from Aditi. We won't clone this one. We'll just take a look at it because this one's just using semantic HTML. So, okay, so that's cool. It looks like we're using a table here. I mean, I guess this is a CV, maybe, but it's a little bit strange. Okay, so this looks like homework that's been completed without actually watching the lesson. So that's not ideal. Right, so that's incomplete because there's no semantic HTML used at all. Okay, so we'll take a look at this one here as well, because I know that Tade did ask me to take a look at his. So just make sure that link's okay. All right, cool. So it should be. Okay, interesting. So this is called Mobile First folder. So let's put that to the test. Looks like there's a lot of information in this one as well. Maybe you've got some pretty big images in here or something. It seems to be taking a while to download. Okay, yeah, so we've got some images. I mean, maybe they're pretty big. Okay, yeah, that looks like a pretty big image. So, okay, cool. I'd be mindful of that. That's the first thing I'm going to say. If this is a mobile first website, your images better be small. Don't be using massive images on a website that's meant to be designed for mobile. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, so let's just make sure your CSS is being brought in. I'm guessing it is. Okay. Okay, cool. So I mean, you can see here as well, even when I'm scrolling down, it's taking a while to render the images because there's loads of them and they're massive images as well. Okay. Right. So I can see here some of these images, you're using pixel width on them and pixel height. So for anybody who can remember what we mentioned in a previous lesson, in the responsive lesson, actually, when you put using images, always put max width 100% on it. The reason is because we'll see here, if we go to below 400 pixels, and bear in mind, most mobile phones, the width of the screen is less than 400 pixels. We start to get scrolls on it as well. So we've got a small scroll. So let's see what's going on here. Okay, so I can see here we've got width 300 pixels. So you are targeting it below that, but really this should be something like 100%. And we don't need... I guess we could have something like 10 pixels. Maybe we could even do calc 100% minus 10 pixels. Okay, so some things to work on, but I still think it's a decent start for what you've done. And if we take a look at, say, the navigation at the top as well, you can see you've got this different layout here, but then as it gets bigger, it changes to a different layout. So that's cool. I would just be mindful of some of the tactics that we mentioned when it comes to doing responsive design, such as images should always have a max width of 100% on there. You don't even have to worry too much about what you could try and do sometimes for new projects, maybe have like a CSS file that you've just got that's kind of like your defaults, so that whenever you create a new file or new project, you can just paste that in. And for example, image here, we could do something like max width 100% display block. And then once we've got that, then at least we're using it all the time and we never have to worry about certain things. But yeah, I mean, it's a decent start though. So I think you're on the right path, definitely. It's probably just a case of there are a couple of things that you forgot. Okay, so we'll take a look at one more and then we'll stop there. So let's see this one. Okay. Okay, interesting. So guessing you're a fan of Rembrandt. Nice. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, this is cool. Oh, wow. Okay. And you've even got this kind of custom font just for these headers. I like that. That's smart. It feels fitting as well with the rest of it. I'm not sure what's happening here as I scroll. Oh, here we go. Okay, it was just taking a while to render. Interesting. Okay. Interesting that it's got a map here as well with the Pluralsight website. So I'm guessing that means you're probably following a Pluralsight course at the same time. And maybe that's where this design's come from and the ideas and things like that. Okay. I mean, in terms of how everything looks, it looks cool. I mean, generally the things on here look really good as well. My only question to you is: have you done this yourself, or has this been copied off of a Pluralsight course? Because I mean, for example, that map insinuates that it's probably from Pluralsight. If you've done this yourself, then that's cool. That's amazing, and I don't want to discredit you in any way. But if this has just been copied from like a tutorial or something, then you won't get the benefits of learning by copying something. You need to build something yourself in order to learn the lessons. Um, so I would just bear that in mind. But in terms of how this website looks, it looks really good. It's using responsive design and everything, so that's good. If that's something you've built yourself, then you can be happy with that. So we'll mark that as complete. Okay, and we'll wrap it up there. So I didn't get to go through as many as I would have liked because we've still got some remaining. I might just have to do them in my own time rather than kind of recording another lesson. But either way, I hope this has been useful for anybody who has been watching along. Take care, and we'll see each other again soon. Bye.